Alright, so now we're going to talk about some urethane fast set plastics, okay? These guys are super duper cool. They set up in about 3 to 5 minutes and then you can demold them. It's something that is easily painted, can be sanded, and really this is going to be kind of the bread and butter as far as what people cast in the molds that we've talked about. But before we get into the specific products that we carry, we have to address the safety concerns. So very much like the urethane rubbers, you got to make sure you keep it off the skin. You have to make sure you have well ventilated area, and especially with this one, you have to make sure that you wear some eye protection. The consistency of these plastics when you're mixing them are about like olive oil, so you just got to watch out because they can splash up and get you in the eye. These guys, like I was saying, set up in about 3 to 5 minutes, and then they set as a bright white plastic. Depending upon what kind of mold you use, you have to either use your universal mold release or your smooth cat or ease release 200. Either of those will be fine as a mold release, and I recommend if you're going to be doing multiple casts, like anything more than about 10 to 15, it is imperative that you use your mold release because this stuff can be abrasive to the surface and it will cause those details to slowly pull out. So we carry it in two varieties. We have the Alumilite White and the Smooth Cast 300 White. They both pretty much function the same, 50-50 by volume, set up in 3 to 5 minutes. I would say this, if you're going to paint it, you got to let it post-cure for a couple of days after you demold it, and you also have to take the mold release off before you paint it as well. Because if you try to paint it with the mold release on there, your paint's going to chip off. If you try to paint it as soon as you pull it out of the mold, it still needs to kind of release some gas, and it's going to cause some like weird surfaces. So just once you pop it out of the mold, give it a couple of days, take the mold release off, then you'll be ready to paint it. The main difference between the Alumilite and the Smooth Cast 300 is that the Alumilite tends to be a little lighter. The Smooth Cast is a little bit denser, and that density kind of really helps give the Smooth Cast 300 a little bit more tensile strength. So if you need a cast that's going to last a good long time, I would recommend the Smooth Cast 300. If you need to make multiple casts and you're not so concerned with the tensile strength of it, you can definitely go with the Alumilites. One thing is, if you want them to stay as bright white, they will yellow over time. So if you need it to be white, I would just go ahead and just paint it after the fact. Also, since it does go white when it cures, don't really worry about pigmenting these guys beforehand. The problem is you're going to end up with pastel colors, or the colors are going to dry to an off color that you're not really looking for. So I just recommend painting them. But really awesome product. Again, like I said, probably going to be the most popular thing that you sell. So give it a go. Now we're going to talk about the different kind of clear and translucent options that we have here at the store. The first one up that we're going to have is going to be the clear casting polyester resin. This guy is going to probably get your best clarity results. However, this one is unique. It actually is a catalyst reaction instead of a curative reaction. So that means that we have this little jar or little bottle of the catalyst, which is the MEKP, and then we have our base resin. And so depending upon the thickness of our cast, that is actually going to dictate the amount of catalyst that we put in. So a general rule of thumb when it comes to polyester resin is the thinner the cast, the more catalyst that you need. The thicker the cast, the less catalyst is going to be required. The reason being is that in a mass, kind of like when we were talking about with our urethane resins, is that it can generate a lot of heat, and that heat helps spur on that chemical reaction. So if we were to pour a gallon of it, we're going to need very little catalyst, because once the reaction starts, that heat's going to actually cause the reaction to continue on. It is going to slow it down significantly by several hours, but it's really the safest way to go. The problem is if you over-catalyze this stuff, one, you could get a terrible cast. So best case scenario is if you over-catalyze, it's actually going to shrink a considerable amount. It'll look like the surface has like melty or like teardrop pattern on it. Two, you can over-catalyze it to the point where it could smoke, your piece could crack, and in certain instances actually cause a chemical fire. So you got to be really careful when you're mixing this stuff up, and you have to make sure you get the right amount of catalyst. As far as safety precautions goes, this product you need to have a respirator in order to use. It is very, very powerful smell. Something that just good ventilation just will not cut. So make sure that you get a respirator that's rated for the kind of fumes for the polyester resin. Also, it's skin irritant, eye irritant as well. So you just got to make sure that you protect yourself with gloves, long sleeves, and goggles as well. But it is a really great option. It can be sanded and like polished up to look almost like glass. It's pretty amazing. And for the sanding process, what you'd want to do is start with like a 320 grit sandpaper and like work all the way up the grits to about 1,000 grit wet dry sandpaper, and then you'll actually go ahead and spray it with a clear coat, and it'll be completely water clear, which is pretty amazing. As far as mold releases, you're going to either need the universal mold release or the Ease Release 200, whichever kind of works best for your needs. The next thing we have up is the Jadio resin, and this is an epoxy resin. This one is also a curative system, so similar to our urethane plastics. It is something that is 2 to 1. Now, epoxy by nature is going to be a little bit more yellow, so this might not be a great option for water clear casting. It's probably going to be something that you're going to want to tint either with powder pigment if you want it to be opaque, or some kind of resin dye to kind of maintain its translucency. This guy's a pretty long cure time. It's 16 hours, and it's good because it actually allows for the air bubbles enough time for them to escape out of the surface. So the slow cure is to your advantage when you're looking to get translucent or clear things. And the mold release for that as well, if you're looking at either the Ease Release 200 or the UMR, depending upon what your mold is. The last thing that we have is our Envirotex. Now, the Envirotex isn't necessarily a casting material. It falls under the clear umbrella, and it really is meant more for like a coating compound. You can embed stuff into it, but you're going to have to pour thin successive layers no larger than 1/4 of an inch, because it behaves a little bit like the polyester resin in the sense that it can kind of shrink, or it can kind of generate too much heat and cause itself to crack. So if you were inclined to embed, just kind of do it thin layers at a time. But for the most part, this is really just a wonderful sealing agent. You know, if you have any places in town that have like, you know, things collaged in a bar top, most likely they use something like Envirotex. That pretty much sums up all the clear options that we have here for kind of casting and coating. Thank you so much.
Alright, I'm going to give you a basic overview of the different kinds of waxes that we carry. The number one thing that you need to know about wax as you're melting it is that you don't want to get it too hot. If your wax is starting to smoke, you've got it too hot, so you want to turn it down. Slow and low is definitely the rule of thumb when we're melting our wax. Wax is generally going to be used for casting, whether it's lost wax for casting metal, or making candles, or any other kind of positive sculpture material. We have 2 basic versions of wax. We have synthetic waxes and we have natural waxes. Alright, so first up we have our amber microcrystalline wax. This comes in 11-pound slabs, and it's a nice soft and creamy wax that is great for casting. It is also really beautiful if you're looking for a slightly cheaper alternative to beeswax. So if you want to mimic that color for sculptural reasons, this is a really wonderful one. Next up we have our Victory Brown Wax. This comes in 1-pound ingots as well as 11-pound slabs, and this has an oil content to it which makes it very soft and malleable. So you can actually sculpt with this underneath a heat lamp, or you can pour it into slabs and sculpt with it that way. I've even melted it into in a crock pot and scooped it out with my hands as it was starting to cool, as cool to the touch, and kind of sculpted it that way. So it's really, really wonderful for that. A lot of people use this in bronze casting as well for a lost wax method, and the color is really nice as kind of a mimicking for the bronze as you're working with it. And the last synthetic wax that we have is going to be our paraffin wax. Paraffin wax is the cheapest alternative that we have, but it's also very brittle. So it is great if you want to make any of the first 2 a little bit harder, or if you want to just cut it to make it a little bit of a cheaper alternative. I know that there are paraffin wax candles out on the market, but because it's synthetic and petroleum based, it's really not the safest kind of candle to make. So I definitely do not recommend this to customers for use in candle making. The last kinds of waxes that we carry are going to be our natural waxes. We have both bleached and unbleached beeswax. These smell wonderful and they make great candles. They have beautiful color, and I've also seen these used in sculptural aspects as well. And then, of course, you can use them if you want to make your own encaustic medium. And then last but not least, we have our soy wax, and soy wax is great for candle making as well. And if you carry any of our new offerings for soap making and candle making, this is a great place to market them in your mold making or at least near your mold making aisle, because that's a really fun way to get very sculptural and fun with your functional materials. Silicone is going to be your best mold making material if you want to make candles or soap, because they will withstand the kind of heat that you're going to need to melt your materials. And that's our wax.
So let's talk some clay. We're not going to get into the full line of clays that we carry. We're really just going to be talking about the polymer clay that most people are going to end up using to sculpt their positives out of, and then in turn try to make a mold from. So you may have heard sulfur-based clays, sulfur-free clays. What's the difference? Why would somebody want to use a sulfur-free versus a sulfur-based? We'll start with the sulfur-based, and we carry the Roma Plastilina. Really, the sulfur additive is put into the polymer clay to make for like really nice, creamy, smooth sculpting. It's like an old recipe that was proprietary that Sculpture House made way back in the day, and a lot of people really do enjoy sculpting with it. Just know that if that's the clay that you're going to use, it's going to really prevent you from using certain mold making materials, most notably platinum cure silicones. So if you do want to use platinum cure silicones, we'll have to do the sulfur-free option, which is the Le Beau Touche or Sargent's Plastilina. Now, Sargent's Plastilina is really soft, and quite honestly, it's probably best used for beginners, wall building, ways to kind of make breaks for mother molds. It really is just a little too soft to get some good fine details with it. So if somebody does need to sculpt with a sulfur-free clay, you definitely want to use the Le Beau Touche. It's a number 4 on the scale, so it's something that is kind of smack dab in the middle. And if you hit it with like a heat gun or put it in a sunny window, you can get it to go ahead and sculpt. It tends to be a little bit stiffer, but it's something that's what you want if you want to carve in really fine details. Those are going to be pretty much the clays that people are going to use. Again, the big takeaway from this is know what kind of clay people are sculpting with so you can recommend the right mold making material. So if it has sulfur, can't use platinum cure silicones. If it doesn't have sulfur, you can use any of the mold making materials, including platinum cure silicones. It's me again. So what we're going to talk about right now is a really neat product called the Freeform Sculpt from Smooth On. Now this stuff is an epoxy clay that you have to knead together equal parts A and B. So you grab a little ball of the A side, a little ball of the B side, mix them together until you get a uniform color, and then you're able to sculpt with it. So what's unique about this product is that in about a 24-hour span, it's going to cure up to a super hard epoxy resin, whatever. And it can be sanded, tooled, painted relatively easily, which is awesome. But the real great aspect of it is that it can thin with water, so you can get really nice, smooth shapes. Now, it's a product that takes a little bit of a learning curve to kind of get used to, because when you first knead it together, it gets actually really kind of sticky and doughy. So what I recommend is you knead it together, kind of set it aside, and let it cure up a little bit to where it gets to the consistency that you enjoy sculpting with. It can be easily, like you can add more parts to it, so like once it's all the way cured, you can actually continue to build on top of that. So that's what a lot of people end up doing, is that they'll sculpt a generic armature, then from there they'll go ahead and they'll add different parts onto it once it's cured and slowly build their sculpture. It is sulfur free, so you can make whatever kind of mold out of it, but what's awesome is that it's so hard and durable that it's just really easy to make a mold off of, or you can just kind of sculpt it and use it as your positive. So, really great product. Check it out. Freeform Sculpt. Alright, so that kind of takes us to the end. Now, bear in mind, this was very much a kind of beginner's look at mold making and casting and all the materials associated with it. So, feel free to continue to do research on it and kind of get to the granular things that we did not talk about in depth.
the best way to learn about this is to really just dive in and do it. So I really encourage you guys to take the information that you learn here, maybe check a couple of these items out of the system and make some samples for your store. Do it with the people that you work with so that everybody kind of has a basic understanding, because there really is a steep learning curve with these materials. You can read and research and watch videos all day long, but until you really do it and have it in front of you and kind of mess around with the materials, you really won't know as much. So we really encourage you guys to get your hands dirty. So,
and if you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to call us here in Louisville, Kentucky. We have all the answers. So
that's mold
mold making.
Bye.